your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Hal Roberts.
Hello, thanks so much for joining us. Former Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has given up his seat at the legislature. Kenney said the resignation is effective immediately and that it was a privilege to serve the constituents of Calgary-Lougheed since 2017. Kenney was also a former cabinet minister in the Harper government, has spent 25 years in the public life. No word yet on what the next chapter will be for the former Alberta Premier. This past Tuesday, Premier Danielle Smith was officially sworn in as a member of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta during a very special ceremony. Smith is a former journalist who became our province's 19th Premier on October the 11th of this year and leader of the United Conservative Party since October 6th, replacing Jason Kenney. Smith entered provincial politics in 2009, becoming the leader of the Wild Rose Party. Some of the promises Premier Smith is delivering in her throne speech included introducing Bill 1, the Alberta Sovereignty Within the United Canada Act, more affordability measures in dealing with a high cost of living, and providing protections for Albertans who refuse to get the COVID-19 vaccine. The province introduced Bill 1 at the legislature, a bill that would grant Premier Danielle Smith and her cabinet the power to rewrite provincial laws in an effort to push back against the Trudeau Liberals. The bill, which is known as the Alberta Sovereignty Act, would allow cabinet to direct Crown-controlled groups, school boards, police forces, and health authorities to not spend money enforcing federal rules deemed harmful to our province. It still has to be debated on and passed.
When passed, this legislation will create a constitutional legal framework for Alberta to push back against federal interference and encroachment. We've been ignored for 10 years. The former Premier, Rachel Notley, tried the Climate Leadership Plan to get a better relationship with Ottawa. It failed. Former Premier Jason Kenney tried to have a collaborative relationship with Stephen Guilbeault in Quebec to get LNG export. It failed. We put forward an equalization referendum to try to start a conversation to change the relationship with Ottawa. It failed. So now we're going to try something new. I think we've got their attention. We've got their attention because I know with the relationship that we're now seeing develop with the federal government finally recognizing that they cannot pass carte blanche power over our natural resources.
Officials say the government hopes to use Bill 1 next spring in an effort to fight Ottawa on issues including energy development, agriculture, healthcare, education, firearms, and social programs. Well, the Alberta NDP was not impressed with Premier Smith bringing forth the Alberta Sovereignty Within the United Canada Act. NDP Deputy Leader Sarah Hoffman says the UCP has kind of lost its focus.
Right now, families are facing the worst cost of living crisis in over 40 years. We have the second worst wage growth in the country. Trailers are being put in the parking lot in front of Alberta's Children's Hospital, but Danielle Smith and the UCP are focused on creating more chaos, increasing costs, and conflict with her Sovereignty Act. Danielle Smith was elected by less than 1% of actual Albertans, and now she wants to give herself dictatorial powers. Today, all Alberta's NDP MLAs voted against the first reading of Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act. We stood up for jobs and for working people. We stood up for the entrepreneurs and innovators of this province. We stood up for our economic future.
Medicine Hat Conservative MP Glenn Mott says he's not happy with the proposed amendment to the Liberals' gun ban bill C-21. He explains how the changes could potentially impact farmers and ranchers.
But what this legislation does is it targets people that aren't the problem in this country. We've been saying this all along. It targets, the Grandpa Joes who are teaching and passing on a legacy of hunting and sport shooting and those sort of things to their families, to generation after generation after generation. And it misses the mark completely. We have no ability with this legislation to limit what criminals do.
MP Motts will also give us his thoughts on the recently wrapped public inquiry into the Emergencies Act that's coming up later in our program. Southern Alberta is in for a very chilly winter this year. That's according to the Old Farmer's Almanac, which says we can expect a colder than normal winter. An official with the Almanac explains how long our region will experience these chilling conditions.
We're looking for the really cold spots to be really in the first week of December, first week of January, and then the last week of January, last week of February. As far as snow goes, middle 10 days of December, end of December, end of January. Where they overlap is the last, say, 8 to 10 days of January. That looks to be like the really, hardcore center of the winter. I mean, which is only stands to reason.
Well, coming up shortly, Alberta Government House Leader Joseph Scow will explain why introducing the Alberta Sovereignty within United Canada Act is so vital. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Alberta legislature was back in session on Monday. Government officials say the focus will be geared toward addressing the inflation crisis and standing up for Alberta's interests. Government House Leader Joseph Scow says legislation will be brought forward to protect our province's constitutional jurisdiction, enable more financial support for families and seniors, and address long-standing issues in the justice system. Scow says, however, that first things first, and that includes the Alberta Sovereignty Act.
It will send a clear message that we will defend and promote our province's prosperity and constitutional jurisdiction. The Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act will ensure our voice is heard so that Albertans can freely contribute and participate in Confederation as proud Canadians without fear of unjust or unjustified federal intrusion into our lives. It will also allow Alberta to set its own path as part of a strong and united Canada. You will hear more about the details of the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act when it's introduced in the legislature.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government is taking kind of a wait-and-see approach on how the Alberta Sovereignty Bill plays out before responding to it. The Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act still has to be debated and passed.
We know that the exceptional powers that the Premier is choosing to give the Alberta government in bypassing the Alberta legislature is causing a lot of eyebrows to raise in Alberta, and we're going to see how this plays out. I'm not going to take anything off the table, but I'm also not looking for a fight. We want to continue to be there to deliver for Albertans. There's going to be things that we agree with that government on. There's going to be things we disagree with them on. And my focus is always going to be constructive in terms of delivering for people right across the country.
First of all, the legislation in many cases offers some imprecisions that we look forward to seeing the legislative process of Alberta address. The bill was introduced at first reading. It wasn't debated and it wasn't passed. So I think before people start talking about challenging laws, I'm not even sure it's constitutional to challenge a law that hasn't been passed.
The Alberta government announced more financial help for those who are struggling with the rising cost of living. Payments for AISH, income support, the seniors benefit, and the child and family tax benefit will go up 6% in 2023. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says it's really important to really help those who are on a fixed income.
Nowhere is the need for help more urgent than for those on fixed incomes. Albertans like low-income seniors and AISH recipients have limited flexibility to adapt to price increases. And right now, they're being steadily squeezed as inflation continues to eat away at their spending power. They need a cushion to absorb the worst effects of high prices. And I'm happy to announce that as part of our government's Affordability Action Plan, we will provide one.
Albertans receiving AISH and income support benefits will see the increase on their January payments, which will be sent out on December the 22nd. Alberta Seniors Benefit will see the increase on their January checks, and those receiving the Alberta Child and Family Benefit will see an increase coming up in February. Team Lethbridge will be making an important trip to the Alberta Legislature on December the 6th. The group will be made up of many local organizations which are going to spread awareness of what Lethbridge can offer our province. This is the 7th mission that Team Lethbridge has made to Edmonton. Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, says past trips have been vital in showcasing Lethbridge to the province through new government initiatives, pilot projects, and collaboration with different businesses and industry.
We have 50 community and business leaders that join me in a delegation to Edmonton. We basically take over the Alberta Legislature building for 3 days. We're going to meet with 20-some ministers and showcase what Lethbridge is all about, all of the great things that are happening here, all of the great organizations that are in Lethbridge. But then we also seek feedback from the government on how we can be a better partner and how we can continue to work with them. So Team Lethbridge is about promoting the city, elevating Lethbridge in the eyes of the province, but also we want to be, again, actively involved in strategic decision making at a provincial level.
The group hosted a kickoff reception on Wednesday so members could learn more about the priorities that the group has for the trip and to meet each other. A Calgary man has been charged with importing cocaine at the Coutts border. Officials at the Canada Border Services Agency say on November the 21st, officers discovered and seized 53 kilograms of the white powder during an examination of a commercial transport vehicle. The drugs, which had a street value of $5.3 million, were hidden within a shipment of produce. 25-year-old Jagrup Singh of Calgary faces various drug-related charges. Coming up after the break, we hear about the wrap-up of the testimony of the public inquiry on the use of the Emergencies Act, and we'll talk more about the proposed gun control from Medicine Hat Cardston Warner MP Glenn Motz. Stay tuned. Canadians have seen a very interesting and perhaps some would say alarming 2022. The end of November saw the public inquiry into Justin Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act wrapping up the testimonies. Now we wait for the findings to be revealed coming up in February from Justice Rouleau. For more on his insights of what happened during the public inquiry, Glenn Motz, the MP for Medicine Hat Cardston Warner, joined me earlier this week from Ottawa. Have a look. Now, Glenn, before we chat about some of the bills, let's discuss what we just witnessed in Ottawa during the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act. What are your thoughts on what you heard?
Well, I don't know if you're aware, I also am the vice chair of the Special Joint Committee on the Invocation of the Emergencies Act, made up of parliamentarians, members of parliament, and senators. And so we are going through a similar process with a different focus than what the commission did. It is troubling at the very end that the narrative changed, that the government all of a sudden broadened the scope of their definition of a national security emergency. Unlike what the Act actually says they were required to do. The Act says you have to follow Section 2 of the CSIS Act that lays out what a national security threat to national security really is. It would appear as if they didn't like that definition because it didn't meet their narrative, right? And so they had to turn around and create their own, but they wouldn't release that. The intelligence advisor to a national security advisor, to the prime minister, wouldn't release it, wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't give any details. Justice Minister Lametti didn't give any details, and the prime minister. They all skated the issue. That's not transparency, and that's not what Canadians are expecting from our committee, nor from the Royal Commission or the Commission, the Rouleau Commission.
Now, Glenn, with your background in policing, was there any testimony that maybe surprised you a little bit?
Yes, I think we had an expectation that there was more coordination in with policing and police operations between the Ottawa Police Service, the Ontario Provincial Police, and the RCMP. They had a plan in place. Unfortunately, the government didn't use it. But I think the most important telling issue is the government kept asking city officials and police officials to continue to have discussions and conversations with protest organizers, but they themselves would not. And that to me is incredibly telling on this government's divisive tactics. The reality is people came to Ottawa to protest what they felt were inappropriate mandates from COVID, how it was impacting their life, and they wanted government to hear them. And so, I even tried to facilitate meetings between Tamara Litch, the main organizer that put this together, and a couple of government ministers, specifically Minister Mendocino of Public Safety and Al Gabra of Transportation. And after a couple of days of going back and forth, they refused. They just said, it wasn't going to happen. And so, the organizers were prepared to have a meeting and then, have their people leave. The government wasn't interested. Since when does the government not listen to their people just because they may not like the position of the people who are there?
Glenn, let's talk about Bill C-21 and the amendment to the proposed gun legislation. Legislation that could potentially impact a lot of hunters and farmers because it would basically outlaw shotguns and even 22 caliber rifles?
Well, what this legislation does is it targets people that aren't the problem in this country. We've been saying this all along. It targets, the Grandpa Joes who are teaching and passing on a legacy of hunting and sport shooting and those sort of things to their families, to generation after generation after generation. And it misses the mark completely. We have no ability with this legislation to limit what criminals do. And that's the problem. If we want to improve public safety, conservatives will be front and center with those conversations, but we aren't with this bill. And so that's the issue. We have now attacked, like the Liberals have done all along, they've attacked hunters and farmers with the addition of many hunting rifles and shotguns.
As Alberta farmers have wrapped up one season and consider what's next, we have a look at an interesting and versatile cash crop grown right here in southern Alberta. We'll have more for you in just a moment. Welcome back. Southern Alberta is known for its very valuable crops like grains and vegetables. But did you also know that hemp is produced here? From an alternative to plastics, durable fabrics, and even helping to keep food fresher longer. Recently, Darren Bondar of Hemp Alta joined Jeanette Rocher to talk about this very versatile plant.
Can you explain how the hemp plant and the plant that marijuana comes from are different?
It comes from the same plant, the cannabis sativa plant. The essential difference is that hemp has below 0.3% THC, so it doesn't have any psychoactive effect. And that's why we were able to use it for industrial purposes.
Okay, so you work with and you study this product every day. So what do you see as the future possibilities for products made out of hemp? It almost sounds like the sky's the limit.
Yeah, the possibilities are really endless, and as we hear every day, we need to make big changes to sustain the climate and really the planet. So we're doing everything from hemp bedding to cat litter to the food preservation paths to soil amendments. So we're really focused on the consumer good aspects, at least Hemp Alta is. But yeah, there's lots of different industrial applications. We can do hemp wood, hemp insulation, just a lot of products that can be made out of the natural properties and strengths of hemp that aren't chemical based. And like hemp insulation is a really great example and something we can make. Instead of putting pink insulation into your homes, which are petrol based, and then you breathe it for the next 40 to 50 years, you can use hemp, which is all natural, and it still has the same properties, keeps your house warm or cool, and all natural, straight from a plant. So there's really 25,000 plus different uses, and it's really just kind of getting more processing capacity out there and educating the public about the endless possibilities.
Amazing. Now, so Darren, on the processor side, obviously there seems to be so many opportunities. So I know recently we interviewed someone who built electric motorcycles, and the body panels for the bikes are made out of hemp. So what kind of equipment would your factory need to create body panels or even shipping crates for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've taken one step where we can separate the hemp stream into all these different byproducts. But then to formulate things like, as you say, like car panels is really popular. It does take another couple of steps, and there's a lot of innovation in Alberta that's being worked on for the last 20 plus years since hemp became legalized in Canada. And now it's really up to the entrepreneurs and to kind of take this great science and this great engineering that's being developed and help commercializing it and bring it to market. So there's still some steps that need to be taken, but I think Canada still has an opportunity to be a leader. It needs to catch up with Europe a little bit, who's a little bit more advanced, but Alberta is definitely a hotbed for it, and the opportunity is there.
Can you give us an idea maybe of how much hemp is actually grown here in Alberta?
I believe in Alberta, well, in Canada alone, the last statistics I think are from 2020, and there were 20,000 hectares, and Alberta was responsible for growing 8,000 of those hectares. So Alberta is a great climate for growing hemp, specifically, obviously in the grow season from May to October. But it's a very hardy plant. Farmers like it because it helps regenerate their soil, so it's very good for farmers to grow. They've got a captive market for hemp hearts, which is the seed. And now that there's some processors like us, Hemp Alta, we're one of the only, we're able to kind of what we call full plant utilization. So we're able to provide those farmers with an additional source of revenue. These big bales will no longer be sitting on their field looking to be, just compost or burned. And we're able to turn those into more commercial products. So I think there's a really great opportunity in Alberta. We hope to kind of fill that gap. We've started in a small way. And, as consumers adopt our products, I'm sure we'll be able to scale to a pretty significant size.
Mm-hmm. So what would it take for more farmers in southern Alberta to start growing it?
Well, they just need a market for the seeds. So I think pretty much all the seeds are being grown. I think farmers know that are being bought anyway. And I think farmers know the benefit of growing hemp, as I just talked about. It's very important to regenerate their soil without chemicals and stuff.
Now, Darren, in your opinion, how much more dollar value could hemp actually bring to the Alberta economy and Alberta family farms?
So it's really just education, consumer adoption, and I think the next 2 to 3 years are going to be really strong for industrial hemp as it kind of separates itself from the intoxication plant, and people realize the benefits that this regenerative crop can have.
The operating budget for the city of Lethbridge was approved for the next few years, and taxes are going up. All of those details are coming up shortly. Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously this week to approve the 2023 through 2026 operating budget. That means the municipal tax rate is going up 5.1% for each of the next 4 years. This is equal to about $130 a year per single-family home based on an average market value of $285,800. Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan says it was a very tough decision, but one that had to be made.
It's set as 5.1, and that's what it is currently going forward, but I'm hoping that we could come back, find some additional efficiencies that we can find throughout the corporation and reduce that. Now, it's something that's what our role is, and as we give direction to city manager and his team, but it is 5.1, so let's not think, well, the mayor said that we're going to reduce this here in 2 years. We're looking for those efficiencies, and we hope to be able to do that as we find efficiencies within the corporation.
Back in 2019, there was a 1.82% municipal tax rate increase, which was the lowest level in 20 years. Lethbridge City Council voted unanimously to have city officials look at other proposed sites and not just the Civic Ice Center for a proposed sober shelter. The What We Heard report says a final decision has not yet been made whether the Civic Ice Center will be converted into a potential shelter. According to a recent study, the building would need between $500,000 to $750,000 for renovations, and it's not yet known if the city or province would be footing the bill. Additional information from the report says if a sober shelter was to be built, the space at the Civic Ice Center wouldn't be ready until at least the fall of 2023. A 54-year-old Lethbridge man has been charged with drug trafficking offenses after police busted him with $51,000 worth of drugs. On November the 30th, police conducted a targeted traffic stop in the 300 block of 3rd Street South. They found more than 193 grams of methamphetamine, 88 grams of fentanyl, cocaine, crack cocaine, and over $1,500 in cash. The driver, Jeffrey Stephen Martins, was arrested and now faces various drug-related charges, including drug trafficking. He remains in custody, awaiting a bail hearing. A new driving simulator at the Lethbridge College is preparing to have a huge impact. The START Center at the college has a new virtual reality driving simulator that will be used to conduct research to support emergency vehicle driver training. Video journalist Micah Quinn chatted with staff from the post-secondary about the benefits of the simulator.
Mike McCready, the industry liaison and research advisor at the Spatial Technologies Applied Research and Training Center at Lethbridge College, showcased the latest in driving simulator technology at the post-secondary. The sim looks at ways to help first responders and law enforcement to improve the safety of their driving once they hit the road.
And we'll be able to provide ways for them to interact with different devices they might find in their squad car, like a radio or a computer or the light bar.
McCready says the college is working with local law enforcement, community partners, and technology organizations from across Canada, including Ontario and Vancouver. Those exact organizations can't be named until all parties come together and sign on the dotted line.
These companies that we're working with are looking at ways that not only they can help us, but also they can create new service offerings from their companies. And that is the end result that START has, is to be able to help industry grow, to be able to create new revenue streams for them. And this is a product that will potentially be able to create a new revenue stream for those companies.
According to McCready, local law enforcement does plenty of driver training, but one of the things they're not able to do is implement virtual reality into their daily work.
Because of the safety issues, is simulate, a pedestrian running in front of the vehicle or a car cutting them off, and how do they respond to that?
McCready says the final product will look and operate differently than this simulator, but the technology is exciting because it doesn't exist in the market of what they're building, and that certainly bodes well for the future of Lethbridge College. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation held their 28th annual Christmas Tree Festival. The three-day fundraiser brought in around $170,000 for the foundation. Executive Director of the foundation, Alan Bartalsik, joins me now and he has the details. Alan, how many trees went out the door this year?
We had 19 trees this year, a total of 25 live auction items. And we had trees go as high as $5,000, $6,000. And it was very exciting. It was busy. It was hectic with the room and then the bids kind of going up in there and then the rebid, and it was very, very exciting.
Now, you raised about $170,000 for the Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation. What is the money going towards?
The money goes towards the greatest needs of the hospital, special projects, programs, and certainly state-of-the-art equipment. And as we want to train and retain new and exciting talent here towards Southern Alberta.
Thanks so much for joining us, Alan. The Chinook Regional Hospital Foundation is one of so many great charities helping out the community while raising funds during this very special Christmas season. Volunteers are also an integral part of charitable work in our community. And coming up, we'll find out just how important many of those volunteers are. Stay with us.